So anyway, last week we left off with Joseph finally being set free from prison. Yay, Joseph, go! And he was cleaned up,
Run like the wind.
and
Out of there.
he got all shaved and ready to see Pharaoh, and he was standing before Pharaoh, and he stood his ground firm with Pharaoh. Just in our opening lines, he basically was letting him know that God is the one who gives interpretation to dreams, not Pharaoh's magicians, not Pharaoh's false gods. It's going to come from God. So that's where we kind of left off last week. And we were in 41:16 is kind of where we ended. So I wanted us to start there again. He gave Pharaoh this statement. He said, "So Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, 'It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace.'" And we didn't really talk about that last week. We just stopped at the fact that he was standing firm. That's going to be God that's going to give you an answer to your dilemmas about the dreams. So even before, Joseph hasn't even heard the dream yet, right? He just knows that Pharaoh's upset. And he's probably either seeing it in his face, or maybe he's been warned, or maybe God's let Joseph know that Pharaoh's on edge, nervous, upset about these dreams. But he gives us this statement, God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace. That's a pretty...
Where did you get peace? I have desires. What?
I'm sorry, it's New King James.
Okay.
So I don't know. I've never heard it say... I don't know what translation. I think I've always seen it peace, but there's so many different translations now. But anyway, but it's a very confident answer to give Pharaoh, to say God is going to give you an answer of peace. He's already trusting, or has foreknowledge. He knows that this is going to help, that God's going to give an answer of peace. And that's a pretty confident statement for Joseph to stay right before the man who could cut off his head, right? He's being very confident. But like Pharaoh, anyone can have peace when their spirit is troubled, because Pharaoh, it said his spirit was troubled, when they seek and accept God's answer. When do you usually don't have peace? When we're disobedient, when we're not listening to what he's telling us. Yeah. He can give us an answer, but we don't take it in and we don't accept it, and there is no peace. So, and it's not a good place to be, and I think it's hard because a lot of us have head knowledge about God and his love and the fact that he gives peace and that he'll take care of us, but we don't take it further than the head knowledge. For example, we know Philippians 4:6-7, right? Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. We know that verse. It's kind of like one of our favorite verses because it's kind of a calming, reassuring set of verses. But how many of us tend to worry? I know I do. You get upset about something's troubling you, and we know these verses, but we don't obey them. We don't really take them to heart. Because what does it say? Be anxious for nothing. That's a command, but we don't take it too seriously a lot of times. We like the verse and we'll quote it, but we're not obeying the command. So what happens when we don't obey? Like Debbie said, this is where your peace goes away. You don't have God's peace because you're not obeying. So be anxious for nothing. How can you know not to be anxious for anything? We were talking about it last week a little bit. How can you know that you don't have to be anxious for anything? How can you trust in that statement or obey that command?
By prayer.
God's got control. What did you say?
By prayer, it says right there.
By prayer. But it's a head knowledge that goes further. What did we talk about last week? Because we know God loves us. You know that he's all wise. We know that he's going to take care of us. He said he would. So if we truly believe those things, we should be anxious for nothing. And it's a really, I have my weaknesses. There are things, some things that make me upset or worried, maybe don't make Blanca upset or worried. We all have our subjects, our things in life that throw us off the train track where we get worried or nervous or upset. But the truth is we're not supposed to be upset about anything. We're supposed to be at peace. So you have to stop. I try to retrain myself. Why am I worrying about this subject? Why is it bugging me? Okay, I'm obviously letting fears take over on this particular subject, whatever it might be. When I'm letting fears take over, I'm not having faith in my God. The faith has stopped. I'm not trusting him and believing in him for what he's told us, that he loves us and cares for us and will take care of us. So I would have a whole lot more peace if I stop and apply what my head knows and actually use it in my life. So it's a tough thing. I think you have to grow and learn it. Because there's some people that never worry. At least they don't appear to. They seem to have it all together. But there's a lot of us that do.
Like they don't care because they don't worry.
Yeah, why aren't you worrying? Yeah, I think back to Tara and I when we were first married. He pretty much was at peace with everything, more calm, not a worried type. Of course, he's been married to me now. I've corrupted him. Anyway, but he worries more now than he used to. And maybe I worry less. So maybe he's helped me more than I've helped him probably. But anyway, he's one of those ones in the early days, he pretty much seemed to have it together on that subject. He didn't let things bother him. He had that complete faith and trust. So.
And there's the verse that God is going to give you in total peace if your mind is
stayed on him.
What?
Stayed on him.
Stayed on him.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about that verse most of the time.
Mm-hmm. And that's
Also today.
Yeah, and it's a very true one because what's happening when we're worrying is what are we thinking about? The problem, what's lacking, and your mind is focused on everything else but God.
What solution we can do for it, not what God can do.
Exactly, we're trying to fix it.
That's mine.
Well, we all do that. We want to get whatever the problem is taken care of right away. You know, why live with it? Why think about it anymore? So.
You say 46 too. I mean 46 also.
So the peace of God will surpass all we understand or don't understand if we would just pray and obey the command to be anxious for nothing.
So in the other verse it says, the peace I give you is not as the world gives you peace.
Yes. Yeah, because there's a lot of things where I remember one big problem in my life that was...
Not writing, Claudia.
Oh, yeah, she's floating.
Forget God.
But I know
Anyway,
I'm sorry.
that's okay. I know one big problem I had at one time. It was so big that there was no way we could take care of it. But for whatever reason, God gave me an extreme peace. I was not worried about it. I just knew that God was going to take care of it. And that just had to be a total blessing of God on me, because it'd be one of those things that would just probably send you over the edge, you know, where you're just constantly fretting and worrying and trying to fix it and just upset all the time. But for whatever reason, God said it'll be, and it was.
Is that when you needed the stroller?
No.
Go away,
No,
get it,
this
no?
was,
Something different. Okay.
no, this was
You
a,
guys have lots
I
of
think
this.
sometimes when you know it's way, way, way beyond you,
Mhm.
that's when you have to have peace.
yeah.
Because there's nothing you can do. It's completely out of your hands. And
So you don't have a
what
choice.
else can you do?
Just
But
hang on.
just trust
Well,
God.
You can still worry and fret.
Well, I suppose not like you could come up with something to do.
Yeah, right.
Some things.
Yeah, there was nothing I could do about the situation or anybody I knew could do about it. I knew it had to be the hand of God that would take care of it, and he did. And that was such a blessing when I had that peace, because it was one of those trials that went on for months. And so I had peace the whole time. It's like that.
But I think how it made God feel. That's where he wants us.
Yes, and that's, well, why does he tell us, be anxious for nothing? He's got it. He's telling us he's got it. So there's a lot of times, like I was saying, we let our fears replace our faith. We let what our eyes are seeing or ears are hearing, or we let our thoughts get out of control. Like, you're thinking on the problem all the time. And we forget who God is. We forget how powerful he is in any situation we're dealing with. And that's why I think God gave us this verse that we all know as well, that we need to apply, is Philippians 4:8-9. Finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there's any virtue and if there's anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. That's not just to think once, it's meditate on these things. The things which you've learned and received and heard and saw in me, these do, and the God of peace will be with you. So it's our thought life that drags us down a lot. So if we're busy focusing on all these good things instead of the negative things that are going on around us, you look for those good stories in your life. Look at the good things that God's doing. What's just, what's pure, what's lovely, what's a good report. Change your focus. When you're thinking on the good things, you'll have a better time of it, and you'll have more peace, right?
And more time in his word.
Yeah, exactly.
That always does it.
Yeah, that's where I jump to when I'm real upset. I'm do much better when I'm reading the Bible. It gets my mind refocused. So, focus your thoughts on good things of God, and his peace will be with you. So we'll go back to our story. Has everybody got that? Go back to our story in Genesis 41, 17-24. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, behold, in my dream I stood on the bank of the river. Suddenly 7 cows came up out of the river, fine-looking and fat, and they fed in the meadow. Then behold, 7 other cows came up after them, poor and very ugly and gaunt, such ugliness as I have never seen in all the land of Egypt. And the gaunt and ugly cows ate up the first 7, the fat cows. When they had eaten them up, no one could have known that they had eaten them, for they were just as ugly as at the beginning. So I awoke. Also I saw in my dream, and suddenly 7 heads came up on the stalk, full and good. Then behold, 7 heads, withered, thin, and blighted by the east wind, sprang up after them, and the thin heads devoured the 7 good heads. So I told this to the magicians, but there was no one who could explain it to me. So we talked a little bit about these dreams the first time they were, it was told about them. Do you remember some of the things? What do we think the river cows were? Hippos, possibly, because that's what comes up out of the river and eats in those reeds in the marsh, which is what was described in the dream. So, but this is the Nile River, because that's what Pharaoh and the Egyptians understood. This is what their life was all about, was the Nile River. And let's see if this is a picture of it. Not a real lovely picture, it's a map. But the Nile River is the longest river in the world. It's 4,132 miles long. It's longer or wider than the United States, because the United States is only about 3,000 or 3,500 maybe at the tip. So this is 4,100. And Egypt, as you probably know, is very arid, very dry. They don't get much rain. If they get any rain, it's maybe on the coastline. They only get 55 millimeters a year on average of rain. Oh, well, I'll show you. So look at this chart. See, Egypt is that little tiny section. See, by comparison, that's how little rain it gets. compared to the other
Those other
Arab.
African?
Those are all Arab, and the continent of Africa type of nations. So Egypt is the driest. That's how little rain they get. And you look at the rest of the world, and gosh, the United States doesn't do very well. But where is it at? The blue zone up there by Egypt, and the top of Africa continent is the lowest. And the red is only a few degrees above that, so to speak. We don't get much more rain at all. So we're in pretty sad shape when it comes to rain too.
It's hard to think of Alaska not getting any. I mean,
It's apparently, it gets
it's
snow, but it's just frozen all the time. So I don't know. But it's a very dry, that's one of the driest places there is that whole region right there. So they're very dependent upon their river. The only reason they have water is from the river Nile. That's why they worshipped it, because it was their life. Without the Nile, they had no life. So, are you causing problems over there? So,
giving the answer to
oh.
the next question, I'm sure.
Oh, you sure? You're cheating. You're going ahead. Anyway, so Egypt's survival is based on the Nile River. And the way the Nile River is filled is because of the rain that happens 4,000 miles south of it in the jungles of the Congo and stuff. So if the Congo and the jungles, that whole area doesn't get rain, the Nile River doesn't have water. So it's very...
Goes north.
Yeah. It's based on the water cycling system and the rain that comes into the jungles. So when God brought this famine, which is really basically the Nile drying up, he basically stopped the rain 4,000 miles away. So it wasn't just Egypt suffering or Israel, the more arid areas suffering. Those jungle zones were suffering as well. They weren't getting their rainfall that they were used to getting either. I just thought that was interesting. Just a little side set of facts. I'd never really thought much about that whole part of it, but I just thought that was interesting when I was looking it up. So back to our story. So, like I said, this is the second telling of the story. In the first telling of the story, it's told from a third person vantage point, and now Pharaoh's telling it from the first person vantage point. In other words, he's saying first it was a generic where he said Pharaoh dreamed. That's the way the first version of the story. This time it's more personal. He's making it more personal. I dreamed, and he's telling it to Joseph, so he's telling it in the first person. And the whole tense of this conversation is he's feeling he's going to get an unfavorable interpretation, that he's not going to get good news. That's just what he senses, that this is not good news, this dream. So that's why he's so unnerved about it. But there's some extra details he throws into this second telling. So, number one, he says, the ugly cows aren't just ugly. That's what he said in verse 3. They're not just ugly and gaunt. But in verse 19, he adds, they are also ugliness as he has never seen. So his story is getting more intense as he tells it directly to Joseph. And the other point he did was the ugly cows ate the fat cows in verse 5. And when they had eaten them up, no one would have ever known they had. They were still ugly. That's what he adds in verse 21. He makes it even more intense. So you would think the skinny cows, if they'd ate the fat cows, they would look better. They'd fatten up, but they didn't. So he's adding that detail when he tells Joseph. And the other change that he added to the story was the 7 heads were thin in verse 6, but in verse 23, the 7 heads were thin and withered. They weren't just thin, they were withered. And we talked about that east wind last week, or no, a couple weeks ago, about that east wind drying up the corn. And so he just adds some more details to really show how concerned he was, how vivid this dream was, and how real it was to him. So go back to verse 25 now. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. Okay, so Debbie, what was the answer?
God showed, oh, that one. Oh, I wasn't meaning the next fill in.
I thought you had the answer.
I had the answer to her question about whose mind is stayed on me.
Oh.
I gave her the wrong reference.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I had to look it up.
Going through all the whole chapter,
Sorry.
finding that person.
That's funny. So God is the one who gave, who gave the dreams to tell Pharaoh what God will do. That's what, once again, here Joseph reemphasizes to him in verse 25 that it's God that gave the dreams, and God's going to give the answers, and God's going to tell you what he's going to do. So Joseph is still standing firm and honestly presents the truth to Pharaoh. And what is about to happen, he's making very clear to Pharaoh, is not an act of nature. It's not just a natural phenomenon to happen. This is something God's going to do. You're going to know this is God. It's going to be very obvious to you. And it's a reminder to us that God is in control. He's in control of our weather systems. He brings storms on for various reasons. You know, the really bad ones, it could be because there's a judgment situation, and you read about that in different places of the Bible. Sometimes he's bringing it on because he wants to bring about some other change, and only that storm or that disaster is going to bring that change. And sometimes he does it to draw people to him. He wants people to pay attention. When he brings on disasters, it's because he wants you to look to him. So there's lots of reasons for the disasters we see. You can't always say that. There are some people who always say when God brings a disaster, that's because some judgment is definitely taking place right then and there. You can't say that. That's only God that knows that. It might be a possibility, but that you can't say that. Only God knows what he's doing with that situation. So let's read Joseph's interpretation of the dreams. Genesis 41, 26 through 32. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads are 7 years. The dreams are one. And the 7 thin and ugly cows which came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty heads blighted by the east wind are 7 years of famine. This is a thing which I have spoken to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. Indeed, 7 years of great plenty will come throughout all the land of Egypt. But after them 7 years of famine will arise, and all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt. And the famine will deplete the land. So the plenty will not be known in the land because of the famine following, for it will be very severe. And the dream was repeated to Pharaoh twice, because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. So 3 times in verses, 25, 28, and 32, God shows Pharaoh what he's about to do. And Joseph makes that very clear to Pharaoh. He's being quite daring. Joseph's boldness and confidence in God, and this interpretation is displayed in his repeated statement that God will do it. He tells him 3 times, God will do it. There's no doubts in Joseph's mind. Joseph was in effect staking his life on the accuracy of this prediction. He also made it clear to Pharaoh. Did y'all get this one? Okay. That the God, because he made it very clear to him, it's that the God, the one and only Elohim, because he's using the Hebrew word Elohim, God the Creator would do this great thing, not any Egyptian god. So he's still standing firm, being very confident and very brave to actually tell Pharaoh this. It's, the fact that he's just been released from prison and slavery, yet to still boldly stand, which is what we talked about last week. And he's continuing to do it through this whole speech to Pharaoh. That's pretty brave to stand there and do that. To tell Pharaoh the one true living God is going to do this. That's a strong opposition to Pharaoh's false gods. And he didn't protect himself, and he didn't build himself up in this conversation. He kept it all very God-centered. He made sure that the glory went to God through this conversation. So now we're going to get some of our foreshadowings for this week. Joseph, speaking only what God the Father revealed to him, foreshadows Jesus, speaking only what God the Father revealed to him to share. He didn't talk about anything else. He just talked about what God was about to do. Same thing Jesus would do.
You know, I think sometimes when we are going through trials, we forget how, and spiritual battles, we forget how Jesus fought with his Father's words. If we don't know our Bible, it makes it harder to fight spiritual battles.
Mm-hmm.
That was Jesus' example.
Mm-hmm.
He quoted scripture saying,
Right.
and it's my conviction, I don't point anybody else, but there have been times when I thought, well, I'm just not getting anywhere, and then it dawned on me, I need to have some fighting words.
Oh, well, yeah.
You know, for when Satan does bring hard times on us or brings temptation to us, we need to know those words. We need to study what Jesus did.
We need to know him just to talk to other people, too.
Definitely.
Just like Joseph's talking to Pharaoh, if someone needs comfort, encouragement, advice, wisdom, if we don't know God's word, we can't share it with them. So it's real important to study and learn and memorize and meditate on God's word.
But have you ever been in a position where you thought you'd just given every good argument you could think of,
Mm-hmm.
and then it dawned on you know,
And the verse pops into the mind.
Right.
Yep.
You realize, oh,
I
yeah.
should have used God's words instead of my own.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's what is so remarkable about Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
He could have said a lot of good things.
Yep.
Well, I've been through this, I've been through that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and yet he continuously gave God the glory.
Yeah.
Just
He stood firm and he just said what he was supposed to say. Only what God wanted to say. So John 17:8, this is some of the things recorded about what Jesus did. For I have given to them the words which you have given to me, and they have received them, and have known surely that I came forth from you, and they have believed that you sent me. And John 8:28, then Jesus said to them, when you lift up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am he, and that I do nothing of myself, but as my Father taught me, I speak these things. And John 12:49, for I have not spoken on my own authority, but the Father who sent me gave me a command, what I should say and what I should speak. Isn't that amazing? You think about Jesus being God in the flesh, that he's only going to speak what God the Father tells him. What an obedient spirit and display to us. And Joseph just, displays that as well, that he only spoke what he was supposed to speak. I hope if I turn my page so I know where I'm at. So, Joseph, here we go, warning of coming danger. Did I skip a page? No? Okay. Did you miss the Joseph speaking only?
Jesus.
yeah.
I was listening to that. but I didn't write
Want me to go back?
it. No,
Okay.
I'll copy it.
She's cheating. So Joseph's warning of coming danger or judgment foreshadows Jesus' warning of coming danger or judgment. Everybody got it? This was your long one. Got to be one in every lesson. So some of those verses tied to Jesus about him warning or announcing coming judgment, so to speak. we find in a few of these verses. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. That's a blessing because he's giving an answer. I'm here to give everlasting life, but this is also a warning. There's going to be people who are going to perish. John 12:48, he who rejects me and does not receive my words has that which judges him. The word that I have spoken will judge him in the last day. So we're held responsible for what we do know. His own words that we are supposed to have known and done, he judges in the last days. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the holy angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory, and all the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them from one another, as a shepherd divides the sheep from the goats. And he will set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right hand, come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you? And the king will answer and say to them, assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these, my brethren, you did it to me. Then he will also say to those on the left hand, depart from me, you cursed, into the everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not take me in, naked, and you did not clothe me, sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. Then he also will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty? Oh, okay, that's right, I guess, huh? When did you see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick in the prison and did not minister to you? Then he will answer them, saying, assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And these will go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. So more words of warning of coming judgment for people that Jesus spoke. In Matthew 12:36, but I say to you that for every idle word men may speak, boy, this is a tough one, they will give an account to it in the day of judgment. That's a hard one, because we all at times have spoken idle words, right?
Okay, tell me what an idle word is.
That's things we shouldn't say.
See, but like, we talk nonsense all the time.
I know.
But idle word as in criticizing? Idle word as in gossiping?
Well, now I'm going to have to go and study it.
That's what I'm thinking.
I just know
You got 3 weeks to study it.
I just know I have said idle words, things that probably shouldn't have been said.
Well, to me, idle means not thought out. Oh, like,
Frivolous.
I guess, yeah, frivolous.
I think it's probably more than frivolous, but, saying things when you shouldn't say them.
Well, maybe all of those idle words are judged. Some of them get you in trouble. Some of them maybe don't go so hard on you. You were just yakking.
Yeah.
You know?
I don't know.
And other things you really shouldn't have
Well,
said.
God knows the heart.
Right.
That's right.
Right.
He knows what you're feeling, where it comes,
If it were hurt or not, maybe.
I would
Yeah.
see. I would think it's things like, and that's why I got to study. It's like when I might reprimand someone or say something harsh to them when I shouldn't have. That was an idle word. It shouldn't. Using my words wrongly, idly. I don't know, but I have to study it.
Idle to me seems,
Yeah.
Cause like that doesn't seem idle, that seems purposeful, because you thought, torrent, you shouldn't be, leaving your water bottle there, something, you.
But I mean in a mean way, something where you're reprimanding somebody when you shouldn't have been reprimanding them because you're cranky. You know what I'm saying? You're
crankiness.
I don't. That's me. It's like I shouldn't have yelled at so and so. They really didn't need that from me. I shouldn't have done that.
Well,
That's an idle word, but I.
God,
Mhm.
and God is slow to anger
Yeah.
I know that when you're.
James, it's James 1
Anyways, that's
something.
Songs about
the
that
image
too.
of God, right? So maybe that's what it means.
Yeah, that makes
Okay.
sense, because idol is like frivolous.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It could
Yeah.
be gossiping too,
yeah, that's definitely idle words.
gossiping, talking about something.
That's what Lori was saying. Idle gossiping. I would think that would classify as well because they're just wasted words. You're just talking about somebody else.
There's
Hey, we'll have to
another-
look it up.
There's another verse that says, may your speech always be with grace and seasoned with salt.
Right, right.
So I think that idle can be something malicious, something accidental, something a gossip, something,
Hmm.
I think it could be anything, and I think that's why it's so broad.
Yeah,
We just have to choose our words wisely, and if,
right.
if we,
I think it goes back to the, if you abide in me, your desires of your heart,
Hmm.
I will give you the desires of your heart will be with God, so your desires will be what he would want for you.
Hmm.
And I think that's what he's trying to say is, don't just blab around everything.
Right.
Think before you speak.
Right.
Which didn't come through to me real well.
As I said, we're all probably guilty of idle words at some point or another, time or another, but
You need to make sure that what you say.
And if you know that you're gonna have to talk to somebody about something, be in prayer about it before you do, So you have the right words to say and not the wrong ones, it's gonna make it worse.
yeah.
So desires.
I'll have to look it up to see if there's some, what the original language.
It's a super good verse.
Hmm. So as you know, I titled this lesson in honor or memory of Lost in Space. Warning, warning, or danger, danger, Will Robinson. So just like Will had his trusty robot in the 1960s version, if you've seen the latest series, it's a little different. Anyway, had his trusty robot warning him and the family of the impending danger that was coming. It's a reminder that in this story, we have a kind and merciful and gracious God. He took time through the dreams to warn Pharaoh and Egypt and that whole part of the world that there's bad stuff coming. God's very kind and merciful. He could have just brought down that famine and not even involved Pharaoh, not had the dreams.
Not
Yeah, because
prepared.
those weren't his people.
Hmm?
Those weren't his people.
Right,
And through them, he blessed his people.
right.
With Joseph, but he could have, you're right, he could have done it.
Could have just done it and taken care of it another way.
Just destroyed Egypt and forgot the other.
But there's always, he does have a heart for everyone, whether they're his people or not. He's still going to show his mercy and kindness to those who are lost, who are not walking in his ways. He's going to still do it. He's ever patient and kind and merciful towards us all the time. And he sends warnings our ways all the time now, whether we're listening or paying attention. I mean, even just his word, the Bible is full of all kinds of warnings to us, advice, things we should do to make life better, to live a better life. We just need to heed those warnings and learn and be thankful for the mercy that God shows us, by sending us information, that'll help us. And he even gave Pharaoh 2 dreams to really intensify and get Pharaoh's attention. That's really merciful as well. He could have just sent 1 dream, but he sent 2 to really make sure. Because it's not just, Pharaoh's life that's depending on the solution to this problem. It's a whole country. It's other countries that are all dependent upon what Pharaoh does with this information. That could be the same with us. The things that we know, just even the basics of sharing the gospel, the good news with other people, to save them from the dangers that are coming their way if they don't know Jesus, we're held responsible for telling people. It's not just our life that's important. Other people's lives are depending on getting that good news, getting that message. It's important that we share what we have. So just like Pharaoh, it's important Pharaoh figured this out, that that God's given him this message and that he needs to respond to it correctly, because other people are depending on him, other lives are depending on him. So I sometimes, it's the one thing that is always very convicting when you think about, we think about ourselves, we receive Christ in our hearts because we want to be with Jesus, we want to go to heaven, and then sometimes we very selfishly don't ever share it with anybody else. We're not caring about them getting to heaven. It's like we want it for ourselves, or we just don't get past that. But they deserve that opportunity too. They deserve the right to go to heaven just as much as we do. So I always find that very, very challenging and convicting, and think, am I being selfish because I didn't share it with somebody when I should have? I was keeping all the secrets to myself. So, but anyway. So, like Joseph, we have knowledge of God's desires and plans for mankind. We have his warnings of coming judgment, and we are expected to warn others too. Just like Joseph is giving Pharaoh the interpretation, he's warning him. So next time when we do meet again in a few weeks, we're going to see that Joseph just doesn't warn Pharaoh, he takes it a step further. And that's what we'll talk about next time when we meet. He doesn't just stop at the warning.